Welcome everyone who's signing in right now. We're going to get started in just a few moments on today's webinar. And for those who are just joining, we're going to wait just a few more moments while people get signed in. Okay, we're going to get started on today's webinar, which is on member communication and customer engagement. Especially now, more than ever, but really always, but especially now during these very different and uncertain times, learning from what communication styles work and adapting when things are not going necessarily as planned is key to any successful communication strategy. Today, our speaker, who is Kimberly Coates, Director of Member Engagement here at LandlordBC, will be explaining how the LandlordBC look at communications can be applied to really any business, but especially yours as rental housing providers. Kimberly Coates has been with LandlordBC since 2014. Her role focuses primarily on membership development and ensuring that LandlordBC members are taking full advantage of the value that they receive as members through the association. Additionally, Kimberly drives our marketing initiatives, including the corporate supplier program and member exclusive group programs. As she's one of the leaders here at LandlordBC, and she works diligently to ensure that LandlordBC's message and core values are well communicated to the membership body and the broader industry. Before I bring Kimberly on, we have a sponsor for today's webinar. It is the I Rent It Right e-learning program. This e-learning program is a comprehensive legislative online course designed to provide landlords and property managers and really any type of rental housing professional, whether you're a building manager or you just work in the office. It provides you with the core fundamentals and knowledge of how to operate within this industry. The program also assists renters and entering knowledgeable landlords. So the program itself is quite robust. And like I said, it gives you that good foundation. So you know that going forward, when acting as a rental housing provider, you'll have the correct information. You can get more information at our website, www.landlordbc.ca, and you can register for that course there. It is free. And once you've completed the course and passed the final exam, you get a digital sticker that you can put on your email signature, on your website, on your vacancy listings, that sort of thing, to show renters that you take a significant interest in being a rental housing provider, which is, of course, a key part of communication, communicating that you do take an interest and that you run your business professionally. So I'm going to bring Kimberly on now. Kimberly, you can go ahead and join us. Awesome. Oh, there we go.
There we are. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out today. I know it's December, which is a really busy month for people at the end of what seems like a very long year. So I really do appreciate everybody coming and taking this hour out of their day to learn a little bit about communication, communicating styles, communicating methods, and what you can use to help when dealing with your customer management. And in our business, tenants are our customers. That's something that LandlordBC is very passionate about, is being sure that our members are supported and positioned into a place where you guys are able to support your tenants through that customer management, people managing aspect of operating a rental housing business. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This will show you the PowerPoint I'll be working on. Just give me one moment here. And I'll just pop this on Perfect. So everyone should be able to see my PowerPoint presentation now. Communication and customer engagement. Again, my name is Kimberly Coates, and thank you, Hunter, for the introduction. I am the Director of Member Engagement with LandlordBC. A lot of my job revolves around just talking to people, talking to our members, talking to the broader sector, really delivering the message about what LandlordBC does, what landlords do. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what it actually means to be a landlord in the province of British Columbia, how passionate housing providers are about providing safe long-term rental housing to tenants. And that's a lot of what I do. It's just being sure that that message that LandlordBC has is being delivered to people, being delivered across the various platforms, and being delivered in ways that various different types of people can understand. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Give me 1 second. I jumped way ahead. I don't think I have it on autoplay. Okay, if it jumps ahead again, I'll go in and see what I'm doing wrong here. So what is communication? At its most basic level, communication is the act of sending and receiving information. So in order to communicate, there needs to be somebody who is providing information, a message that's being sent, and then somebody who's receiving that information. So we communicate every single day, whether it is a nod to a neighbor or engaging in a more detailed conversation. That act of communicating is vital to developing relationships, sharing ideas, and managing your tenant and customer relationships. So that transfer of information from one person to another, very important, something that we often take for granted, something that businesses often take for granted because it does seem so simplistic, but it's not always easy. We've all been on the receiving end of a snotty email or an abrupt text message where somebody has said something, they don't mean it the way it came across, but the nuances of communication come into play, and your message is often opened for people to decipher the way they please. So one of the really important things with communicating is being sure that you're being very clear. It's a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice. So while that all seems very simple, as I mentioned, it's very complex. Your message can be impacted by a range of things, such as your emotions, the emotions of the people who you're sending that message to, cultural factors, the method being used. A variety of things can impact the way that you come across when you're communicating with people. Accurate and effective communication, it can be very hard. This is why communication skills are something that is highly valued. And sometimes, even when we try our best, communication can fall short of the needs of our audience. You can feel like you've done everything right, feel like you've been as clear as you can, and there just might be a few people who the message doesn't come across the way that you want it to. That's not necessarily a depiction of them or a depiction of you. One example I always think about from my own personal life is, you know, you're having a really bad day and somebody sends you a question and it's just the last question that you needed today. You've had such a busy day and you get it, they mean nothing by it. But of course you look at it and you think like, what is this person doing? Really, they've done absolutely nothing wrong. It's just because your own emotions, the own factors in your life are influencing how you're reading that message. So that's something as well. The other side of communication is being sure that you're open to the understanding of the different nuances that impact how people interact with each other. Hunter, I'm not sure why my PowerPoint keeps skipping ahead. I don't have it set up on going ahead here. I'm just going to take a quick look at why that's happening. Give me 1 moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't have it set, but that's okay.
It's just, yeah, screen share doesn't control the PowerPoint, so I don't know.
No, it's very odd. I'm not sure why it's skipping ahead like that. Is it okay if I just view it this way? Is that still fine?
Sure.
Okay, just because I don't want to keep worrying about it skipping ahead too much there. I'm not sure what I have. I ran through this before and there was no issue. So media controls. Oh, okay, that's fine. So the basics when it comes to communication, there are 4 types of communication. You wouldn't think there would be this many, but even within those 4, there's little subtypes as well, but the basics are there's verbal communication, there's nonverbal communication, visual communication, and written communication. And while you may adopt one of these as your primary method when delivering a message, usually they're supported by one or two of the other methods. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail just to give you some examples. So verbal communication. Some tips to remember when you decide to use words to express yourself, and that can include one-on-one discussions, presentations like we're having today, and formal meetings, is you want to be sure that you establish eye contact when you're speaking with people, and you want to ensure that your nonverbal cues, so those will come into play here as well, those nonverbal communications, like your tone of voice, your body language, your facial expressions, that they're conveying the same message that you want them to. So if you're going to go up to somebody and have a very positive conversation with them, you're hoping to have a positive interaction, then you want to be sure that you're approaching them with a positive tone, your body language is open, people feel like you're approachable, that type of thing. And also be sure that you're always using respectful and professional language. You know, we see people every day, we're very casual. And that's absolutely fine and appropriate when you're developing relationships with people, but you also want to be sure that you're always using language with your tenants that is respectful and professional. Even if you see these people on a daily basis, you still want to be sure that, you know, you're treating them, you're speaking to everybody you come into contact with in a way that that really shows that you're a professional housing operator and that you take pride in what you do. You want to be sure that, sorry, I'm just losing my spot here. Perfect. Okay, sorry. So moving on for nonverbal communication, this is a more nuanced type of communication, and it includes things like your facial expressions, your gestures, your tone of voice, and your body language. So anybody who's had any type of in-person interaction with somebody for verbal communication has seen these nonverbal cues come into play. So whether somebody's standing there talking to you and their arms are crossed, which can be a very defensive position to stand. Poor posture can come across as somebody who appears unprofessional. Avoiding eye contact can make you come across as not being confident. There's a lot of these types of things that come into play. You don't necessarily have to overthink on these issues at all, but you just also want to know if you're going to go and talk to somebody and be professional, and you know, you want to open the lines of communication with somebody and make yourself feel approachable. Service with a smile. There's a reason that they say that, because it does set the tone for all your interactions, and it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much to kind of sour somebody's opinion of communicating with you. It can only take, you know, one negative interaction to really make you seem unapproachable. And so service with a smile and making sure that you're paying attention to the nonverbal cues you're putting off can make a huge difference in how you deal with your customer base. Again, there's certain things about this that you can't control. I mean, for example, if you're very tall, very broad individual, sometimes you're just naturally going to come across as intimidating because you're a large person, like a large physical form. That's fine. There's things you can't control, but it's a matter of using as many of these methods as possible to make sure you're conveying yourself in a professional manner and that the message that you want to get across to your tenants and your customers is coming across it the way you want it to. So the next type is visual communication. So this is using images and graphics to communicate a message efficiently and effectively. So most commonly, we see visual communication being used on social media and as part of advertisements. But as housing providers, we can utilize this to help get messages across to your tenants. So for example, non-smoking signs, that symbol would be considered a type of visual communication and something that everybody understands. So it's a really good way to support different types of communication that you're having. So for example, if you have a non-smoking section of the building, or if the whole property is non-smoking, putting up a sign that just says the words non-smoking might be effective for some people, but other people that may not register with them. Whereas when everybody sees, whether they can read, regardless of age, everybody mostly knows what that non-smoking sign means. So you're using that to back up your written communication, which is the fourth type on the PowerPoint here. So written communication includes things like emails, memos, newsletters. We use email quite a bit at LandlordBC as part of our communication strategy. Landlords use email, text message quite often to communicate with tenants regarding different things, and then also typing up notices and newsletters and that type of thing. So the ability to communicate clearly, concisely, and concretely in writing ensures that everyone you work with will understand what you are telling them. And because written communication skills are so important, it's actually a really good idea to take the time to improve them. So be sure that you're using your spell checks and that type of thing as well, just to make sure that whatever you're writing is saying what you want it to say. We've all seen those lists on Facebook and BuzzFeed where the grammatical errors can change the entire meaning of the memo. Just take the time and don't necessarily feel like you need to say something in 20 words that you can say in 5, right? So just be concise. No parking is a lot easier than saying, please don't park your vehicle here, right? And the message gets across exactly the same. People nowadays, human behavior and marketing and sales in general has shifted a lot because people don't have the time to read things. We are so bombarded with information nowadays from social media, from advertisements, from television. There's so much noise in our heads from people trying to sell us things and relay us information that old adage of having an elevator pitch is now more true than ever. You really want to be sure it's short and sweet and something that people can glance at and get your whole message. That's something that's really important. So being able to write concisely, being able to back up that concise writing with maybe a visual aid, all of that stuff really helps get your message across in the way that you would like it to get across and get it across to the largest number of people. So as I mentioned, people will respond and process information in different ways. Some people will respond better to visual communications. Some people will respond better to verbal communications. There's no right or wrong way to process information. It's just that everybody's brains work a little bit differently. Some people like to have everything written out in front of them. That's easier for them. Other people, they respond better to a picture. Some people need to have that in-person conversation. Right? We see that with our membership all the time. We have one subset of our membership wants to use our online guides, our online members only section of the website. They use that to find the information they're looking for. And we have others who still really appreciate being able to phone into our legislative helpline and speak to a real person. We offer both of those for a reason, because we know that people like to process information differently. So we want to be sure that we're trying to meet the most communication needs that we can for the largest number of people. So when you're developing your communication strategy, which is something I'm going to be talking about shortly in a little bit more detail, you want to try and incorporate as many different ways, many different ways and different types of communication as you can. This way, you can ensure that you are reaching a broad audience and properly working to achieve your objectives. So if you have a building that, say you're managing or owner manage a multi-unit residential building, and you've got 5 floors, let's say there's 10 units in the building, you need to communicate something to all of your residents. You need to decide a way that's going to reach all of those people. So you may think to yourself, okay, putting up a notice in the elevator, that'll reach everybody. Everybody goes in the elevator. But if you dig a little deeper, you might actually find out, wait a second, I've got a few residents who live on floor 1, the main floor of the building. They don't need to go into the elevator ever. So that memo might be lost on them, right? So you need to look at the big picture and think, okay, so maybe you do put a memo in the elevator, but maybe there's also a notice board by the mailbox and you decide to put the notice board up there. Maybe some of your tenants are, older folks who don't use email, who like to stick, especially right now with COVID, they're sticking into their own apartment. They may not be going to get their mail as often. They may not receive mail at all. So maybe that's a situation where going and knocking on their door and having that quick in-person conversation might be the better thing to do. That's something you have to decide when looking at who your customers are and the type of communication and the type of business that you want to run for them. So everything from standard maintenance information, community events, and even more formal residential tenancy branch notices is information that at some point you are going to need to share with your tenants. And you should have a proper plan in place for how you plan to communicate that information when needed to those tenants. So communication is all about asking the questions. I always think about it this way, in the sense that when you say anything, even if it's not actually a question, you are opening yourself up for feedback, and that's a good thing. You want to hear back from your customers, whether it's good, bad feedback, positive, negative. You want to hear what they have to say. As members of LandlordBC, please never hesitate to send an email to me or any member of the team with any feedback you have, because we use that feedback to alter how we do things to be sure that we're meeting the needs of our customer base. And the same thing goes for landlords. You need to hear from your tenants so that you can be sure that you're able to properly manage your asset, right? So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. As I've mentioned many times, there can be crossover of the methods when you use to engage people. Some of the methods that LandlordBC uses is social media. We're very, very active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Our monthly association e-newsletter, which I hope all of you are getting and all of you read. Our website, we have a very good blog. We have the secure members only section, and our quarterly magazine, The Key, which is sent out to everybody 4 times a year. So LandlordBC membership, it consists of over 3,000 housing providers who own or manage property, and that represents 150,000 units of rental housing across BC. Because our membership is so diverse, we need to be sure that we're addressing the needs of our members in different ways. So the reason that a large property management firm would enroll as a member with LandlordBC is very different than why a private landlord who owns an investment condo or a small building would enroll as a member with LandlordBC. So we want to be sure that our offerings meet the needs of that diverse market. And we also want to be sure that our communication methods meet the needs of that diverse market. Outside of our core membership base, and this is just to give you an idea of how varied a communication strategy can become. Outside of our core membership base, we also engage with industry stakeholders, and they respond differently to various forms of communication. So it's important that we, as an association, use different platforms and communication methods to get that information out to them. For example, when I speak about social media, even within social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of those social media platforms require different methods for us to communicate. So for example, for those of you who are on Instagram, you know that Instagram is very visual. It's all pictures. You scroll through, there's a little bit of a caption underneath the pictures, but for the bulk of it, you're looking at the images. So we have a fantastic communications coordinator, 2 of them on our team, and they work really hard to be sure that we're developing those graphics so that people who like to use visual, who like to use Instagram as their main method of getting information, can get what they're looking for from our Instagram feed. Whereas, you know, Facebook, we have a little bit more option there to share a little bit more text. People read a little bit more when it comes to a Facebook post versus what they would on Instagram. So when it comes to your communication strategy, you really want to map it out. So it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, keeping it simple and straightforward is really the best way to succeed. Communication, as I said from the onset, it sounds simple. It is detailed, but it's not necessarily complicated. It's just a matter of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and being as consistent as you can. So mapping out your goals and your strategy, excuse me, this will help you stay on track and act as a reminder to help you manage your assets. So really what you're doing is you're developing almost a communications calendar that's going to keep in mind what you need to communicate with your tenants, when you need to communicate with them, what seems to be the best method to communicate a particular issue, that type of thing. And if you map this all out, it really helps you stay organized. And this can be used regardless of the size of your rental portfolio. And I'll show you, I have a template, a slide or 2 down, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. So what are the best methods of communication that you can use to communicate with your tenants? So a lot of this is going to depend on the type of rental housing business that you're operating. If you're the owner of a multi-unit building, you might have a notice board in the lobby or the elevator. Some of our members have adopted tenant e-newsletters, and they'll send that out on a monthly basis that just gives a little bit of an update about what's happening in the community. reminds them that they can reach out to the building manager or property manager or owner anytime if they have any concerns. That type of thing is really handy. And if you're a small landlord, let's say with a basement suite, perhaps you have a shared common space like a laundry room. If you have shared laundry where you want to put up a notice board, and then you can, put up relevant updates, even if it's just things like landscapers are coming on Monday, and just letting them know. And it really helps build that relationship of trust, because then your tenants know that you're not going to catch them off guard with things. And on your side as a landlord, it really helps, because if your tenant feels like they're in the loop on, the items that will directly impact their ability to live. So one of the ones I always think about is, it's the example I use in the next slide, is washing machine repair. So say you have a washing room and Coinomatic's going to be coming in and doing repair to the washing machines, their annual maintenance. Well, you want to give your tenants an update on that and let them know that's going to be happening, so they can plan their lives accordingly. Because if somebody always does their laundry on Tuesdays and suddenly they're not going to be able to do their laundry on Tuesday next week, they probably need to know that, right? Because they're going to need to adjust what they do. And you don't want to try and catch people off guard with that type of thing. It seems like a non-issue. Well, you have to wait one more day to do your laundry, but these are the things that people actually plan into their schedules, right? So we just want to be sure that we're giving people enough time to adjust their behavior accordingly. And it really helps, makes your tenants feel respected, makes your tenants feel valued. And it also really works as a two-way street, where now if you're communicating with them, your tenants feel like they can communicate with you. And there's a lot of situations where your tenants are going to be your eyes and ears, like especially with things like repairs needed in their unit. You want your tenants to feel comfortable coming to you and saying, I've got a little leak under the bathroom sink. Can you come take a look at it? As opposed to them coming to you 3 months down the line and now they've got a huge puddle of water, where if they had felt comfortable coming to you originally, you could have saved yourself a lot of headache. So you need to decide what's going to work best for your rental business, what's going to work best for your tenants. And remember, nothing's set in stone. What works for one tenant might not work for them all. You might try something and find that it wasn't as impactful as you wanted. So you can always adjust and try something new. And just always keep those 4 types of communication in mind. Adjust your methods to meet the needs of those you were trying to inform, and use more than one method. So this right here is just a little example of how I like to map out communications. I gave an example at the top there. So our LandlordBC e-newsletter, that goes out 2 times a month, once at the start of the month and again mid-month. The method of communication, we use an email. So it's a written communication, although it does have some visual aids in there as well, which is really helpful. Gives it a nice kind of, gives it a lot of character when you're reading the email. The audience, that email goes out to all of LandlordBC members, and the owner of that task, so who is responsible for doing it, that's our great LandlordBC events and communication coordinator, Erin. She's the one who puts that together and sends it out to everybody. So this, again, using the notice of washing machine maintenance example, is something that you can adopt for the management of your rentals. So washing machine maintenance, let's say it's happening 2 times a year. So a notice has to go up March 1st and a notice also has to go up August 1st. The method of communication, maybe you know that there's a few different methods that work best here. So you're going to send it out via email to all your tenants. You're going to put it on the tenant notice board, and you're also going to post it in the elevators. So who's this going to? All the tenants and residents in the building. And then who is responsible for doing it? In this case, I put down it's the building manager. So the nice thing about this is not only can you open it up and look at it like a calendar and say, okay, I know what's coming down the pipe. We're getting into the new year here. These things are on the list. It also gives a bit of ownership to the person who's responsible for doing the task. So it makes people accountable, right? And when you're managing people in general, everyone likes to know what they have to do. Everyone likes to know what their accountabilities and responsibilities are. And this is just a really good way to lay it out, so it's simple and straightforward. So I talked about communication as being asking the questions. Engagement to me is about using the answers. So again, when you're communicating, you're opening yourself up for feedback, you're opening yourself up for constructive criticism. So engagement is, what are you going to do with that information? So your customers in this case, LandlordBC members, they've taken the time to communicate concerns to us. So now what are we going to do with that information? Is there a way that we can implement these concerns, this feedback, positive or negative, into how we run the association? As I mentioned, some really enjoy having our helpline, others join for group programs. People have other reasons that they feel like they want to be members with LandlordBC. So we want to know why our members value their involvement with our association. And then we're able to take that information and use it to streamline our core offerings. So that's a very important part of what we do here. So the best example I can think of that happened in real time that anybody can witness still now is our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So early on, LandlordBC, we were running monthly surveys asking for feedback on rent collection and our industry's overall experience navigating the early stages of COVID. This feedback was instrumental in helping us fine-tune not just our government relations process. It helped us advocate on behalf of the industry to be sure that we understood the challenges that were facing landlords and we could communicate those to media and to decision makers in our industry. We were able to hear the primary concerns of our members. We were able to adapt our services accordingly. Within, I would say, a week of us all having to transition to work from home, we were able to have a COVID-19 specific webpage built and updated, a robust webinar series that we rolled out as well. This is the last one of that series, and we'll be continuing these webinars into 2021. Member resources like our exclusive rent repayment plan that our members can take advantage of, a lot of COVID-19 specific contracts and FAQ sheets and things like that to really support our members as they navigate what was a very uncertain time for landlords early on. And our member resources, were all based, this was all based off feedback that we received from our members and from industry stakeholders, right from the very onset, where people wanted a letter that they could send to their tenants that just explained what was happening, explained COVID, explained the needs for social distancing. This was all stuff that we were able to develop based on feedback that we got from our members. So when you do take the time to fill out a survey or send us an email, that's not falling on deaf ears. And by taking that feedback and putting into something concrete that our members could utilize, I personally feel like that really shows that we value our members and that we value the feedback we get. So you want to be sure you're applying that same principle to when you're engaging with your tenants. If a tenant's going to come to you and say, hey, I get a lot of junk mail and I throw it in my recycling bin in my apartment, and I would really appreciate it if we had a little recycling bin right by the mailboxes, so that when I open my mailbox and there's a whole bunch of flyers that I don't need, I can just throw them right in the recycling bin, because I notice that some people just chuck them on the floor, right? So that could be feedback that you get from a tenant, and then you could think to yourself, you know what, that's perfect. I'm going to put a recycling bin here, because that will limit things like people throwing junk mail on the floor, discarding things in inappropriate places. And it shows your tenant that you value what they gave you. This tenant has taken the time to communicate that with you. They're thinking about the broader community within the building. And now you can use that feedback to provide that service to your tenant. And it really does show that you appreciate the feedback that they've given you. So why engagement is important. So engagement builds a sense of togetherness. It builds a sense of community pride. As a landlord, it does let you remind your tenants that they're valued, and it gives you, the owner, feedback on how you are doing. So the feedback on how you're doing is very important, because it lets you know what you can do better, lets you know where you can save money, which is something that landlords should always be taking a look at. Tenants feel comfortable approaching you with issues like repairs or concerns. That's very, very important. It might not necessarily seem important off the top, but you really want to be sure that your tenants know that if they come to you regarding a repair that's needed in their unit or on the rental property, it is better for you as a landlord to know that that repair needs to be done than have a situation where the tenant feels uncomfortable approaching you about it, because that's just going to allow that repair to fester, and it's going to cost you a lot more down the line to get it fixed. So a good relationship with your tenants is also priceless when it comes to properly managing and maintaining your property. Having a good tenant that you're providing that safe, sustainable, long-term housing to is really a great value for you as the landlord. You want to be sure that you have those tenants in there who are going to respect the property, who are going to respect you. They're paying their rent on time, that type of thing. So it is nice to be sure that you're building that professional customer relationship with them. And I've mentioned this before, but it definitely deems repeating. Just like communication, engagement is not a one-size-fits-all solution. People will respond to an engagement process in different ways, and some might not respond at all. We have members who've been with LandlordBC for decades. They're with us for one or two specific reasons. Not a problem. They don't want to engage in the process of answering our surveys and things like that, and that's totally fine. As long as we're able to keep meeting the needs that they have for being enrolled as members with us, we're more than happy to do so. So the goal of engagement is to combine all the information and feedback that you receive and use that to best meet the needs of the largest number of customers. So engagement is about that relationship building. So for example, I really wanted to know, why do people become members with LandlordBC? And this seems like a really simple question, but it changes quite often. And I really wanted to know that answer. And I didn't just want to know it from our current members. I wanted to know it from people who were no longer members with us. So people who have sold their rental houses, they've canceled their members and they're canceled their membership. They're no longer members with LandlordBC because they're no longer landlords. So what I did was I sent out a survey to them. I got about 100 people respond to my survey, which was fantastic. And I just asked them, can you please rank why you joined up with LandlordBC? Back when you were in the business, why did you join up with our association? And what I found was, first off, most of the people who responded were the smaller landlords, the people who had a secondary suite or an investment property. They wanted access to our forms, to our helpline, and to our government advocacy. They really liked seeing LandlordBC being mentioned in the media, seeing that they did feel like they had somebody who was voicing the concerns of the rental housing industry publicly. And those were the top 3 reasons that they enrolled as members with us. So I was able to use that information. I went back, made sure that for our marketing, we continue to be communicating that core grassroots value proposition. We know that people join up with us for different reasons. That's totally fine. Some people, those 3 things, they may value them in a different order, but we can use that people still want our forms. They want to be able to call in and talk to our helpline, and they want to see us in the media and know that we continue to champion on their behalf. So by engaging with those individuals, I was able to get that feedback. It helps me build relationships with them, even though they're no longer involved in rental housing. They could become landlords again at another time. And now they know that LandlordBC is still here. We're still offering all of those things. And if they ever do become landlords again, or they can refer us to somebody they know who's still operating a rental house, that's great for us on that term of things, on a business development standpoint as well. So housing providers, especially those with multi-unit residential buildings, you're managing people and you're managing communities. So tenants who feel valued, they'll take pride in where they live and they'll want to communicate with you. So again, that engagement piece is very important on ensuring that you've got that people management side of your business in place. So engagement and LandlordBC. I just mentioned that survey that we did. We've done a few surveys. That was one of them that I did. And then we also had the rent collection survey that we ran all through the summer. I think the first one went out in April, ran right through to, I want to say, July. Just getting some feedback on how our members in the broader industry were doing on rent collection during COVID. It was a very challenging time for our industry. It was a very challenging time for tenants. Our industry did fare quite well. The feedback on that survey, which we shared publicly every time we completed one, we shared the results, did show that, you know, over 80% of landlords were able to collect most of the rent during that really, really tough time for people, which was great. We wanted to see that. We wanted to know how our members were doing. We wanted to know how people were faring because it was a very challenging time. Additionally, we do things like contests. So we've done a few contests in the past for gift cards and things like that to up engagement. Mostly on social media, we'll utilize those because that's where people like to see contests, and it was a like and share, you know, see this a little bit of an infographic that shares some information about LandlordBC, some information about being a landlord, and we would have like and share, and you'd be entered into a contest to win a gift card or something like that. Roundtable discussion and events. Because we can't do in-person events right now, we've lost a little bit of that opportunity to verbally communicate with our members one-on-one, but fortunately, webinars have really filled a bit of that void. We've done some roundtable discussions as well with smaller groups, and that's something we're looking at doing in 2021 as well, where it's more of a discussion-based forum about different things happening in the industry, different things that LandlordBC can do better, things that we can do to support you. Our phone feedback is huge because the helpline is such a great value for membership. We get a lot of feedback from our members over the helpline. We get a lot of feedback from our members over email as well, which is great. So that's something that's definitely, we don't take that for granted. The ability to have people phone in and give us feedback is very important. And it's also, the helpline is one of the great ways that we continue to provide education to our members. So why do we ask for feedback? We ask for feedback and we want to engage with members to be able to better serve you, to be able to better represent the broader industry, streamline our focus, so be sure that we're focusing on developing the right tools for you, and ensure that we're addressing issues that are the biggest concerns for our sector, right? So that's really important as well. Our sector is very broad. Rental housing in BC is very different than some other provinces in the sense that we do have a large mom and pop, as we call them, small private landlords. And we want to be sure that we are able to address those concerns. And we don't necessarily hear all of them all the time. We know the main ones, but if there is something that you feel needs to be addressed, or you feel like you just want to voice a concern to us, you're frustrated with something and you want to share that with us, you are more than welcome to do that. Please do feel free to send us an email, and we do pass that stuff along. We do compile it and use it to help navigate what we're doing. So that's definitely very, very important. And again, we want to make sure that our members can see, and the broader industry can see, that while we ask you to communicate with us, we also use the information you give us to build our strategies and to move forward as an association. And I really hope that some of the things I've shared with you today are things that you'd be able to implement into operating your own business. And don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to have that open door communication policy, because not everything you hear is going to be great, but you'd be surprised the type of feedback you'll get from people that, you may not have realized that something was valued by somebody. And then you find out, wait a second, my tenants really did appreciate that I, have fresh flowers in the lobby every day. Like it really put a spring in their step when they can't go anywhere else right now because we're all pretty much locked down. So that's everything for my presentation. Sorry about the little IT hiccup early on there, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I've got my email there as well. So again, you're more than welcome to email me anytime. It's kimberlyc@landlordbc.ca. I'll go ahead, I'm going to stop the screen share, and then we can go on and continue with questions if people have them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kimberly.
Thanks.
That was great. And thank you to all of our attendees for your thoughtful attention. There is a Q&A tool that you can utilize to go ahead and ask questions. And so let's see here, what questions have come in. So the first question, I guess, here is, can we use things like a notice board or email to serve notices and communicate with tenants regarding things that fall under the residential tenancy branch?
Mm-hmm. So the answer to that is no. There's a lot of things that need to be considered when it comes to serving proper specific RTB notices. And Hunter's done some webinars and blogs on serving notice. I think we actually have a guide available on the secure members only section site of our website that talks about how there's methods of service for residential tenancy branch notices. So when we talk about using notice boards and things like that and public postings, this is for stuff that's more about building management and community management as opposed to your one-on-one tenant issues. So this is stuff you can post about, spring cleaning is happening. So salting or ice removals going on. Window washing is a big one. If you have a tall building and you're going to have some guys hanging outside the window on ropes, you might want to give your tenants an update that that's going to be happening, that type of stuff. And then also one of the things that you can do is some of our members, they'll also post stuff about community initiatives going on. So perhaps there's a car-free day happening, or perhaps you're going to do a Big Brother's clothing pickup. That type of thing you can put up there and just really let your tenants know that if that's something they want to be involved in, they can. But for those specific residential tenancy branch issues, like, notice of rent increase or different notices or warning notices about different potential tenant issues, that's something that you do need to be very sensitive about and be sure that you're communicating that in the proper way with the tenant. And also you need to be sure that any communication you do on a public notice board doesn't violate any tenant confidentiality and privacy, which is why that's the type of stuff you want to do one-on-one and make sure you're following that outlined accepted methods of service.
Mm-hmm. So communication is a two-way street, and it's changed a lot lately. I mean, it's always been a two-way street, but now it's more like a multi-lane highway with on and off ramps. And social media has made it a little bit, it's hard to deal with things. We can put things out there and we can try to be positive, but what happens when we have things that are posted about us that are perhaps rude, maybe untrue, on social media? How should landlords address this?
So there's a really great blog I actually wrote a year or two ago that I'll share as part of the recap of this. And it talks about how when somebody writes something on social media, and if you decide to reply to them, you're not actually replying to that person. And that really struck a chord with me because I thought, okay, so somebody leaves a bad review on Google, right? They come to your restaurant, let's use an example, and says, oh, this restaurant was terrible, I'm never going there again. So you could go on there and you could respond to that person and you could say, hi, Bob, sorry you had a bad experience, but we don't need your business. You could say that, but who is going to be reading that? Because the person who's left the negative review, they've said their piece and they're gone. They're not revisiting that review, right? So the people who are actually going to be reading the review and your response to that review are potential customers coming down the line. So if you want to go on and say something like, hi, Bob, I'm really sorry you had a bad experience. We value your feedback. We work all the time to make sure that we're meeting the needs. Perhaps there's a reason that whatever bad experience happened that you want to explain, because you're actually voicing your side of the story to other people who are going to be reading that review, not to the bad reviewer. And that really struck a chord with me because when I read reviews on Yelp, I've seen some where the business responds very defensively, and I just kind of laugh to myself and think, man, they need to get a new PR manager because this person is just like really upset at Hunter 3.0 for what they wrote.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't leave nice reviews, so that makes sense. But that makes sense. You've talked about in the past about, and you specifically have talked about your online reputation. You talked about this in our blog, in our magazine, and you are in the upcoming magazine as well, the winter issue of The Key, for all of our readers, that again, very much on the same topic. It's all related around communication, how you present yourself, and how you present yourself, as you say, is part of that communication strategy. Mm-hmm. We have a question here, again, it comes down to that two-way street. What happens if it is just a one-way street and you have someone who is just not responding to emails or text messages? What can you do about that?
Yeah, so, it's a challenge because we do try the best we can to reach out to people, and you want to be sure you can communicate with them. And, coming back to what we can all learn from COVID-19 is it really did force a lot of us out of our comfort zones in terms of needing to reach out to people differently, in terms of needing to, come together. And I think a lot of people showed a lot of compassion for each other when the pandemic struck and we all kind of had to come together. One thing that came up in another webinar we did was some of our members were sharing stories where they had tried to reach out to tenants and, they weren't getting responses. They weren't getting calls back or responses to email or text messages. And this is where you can always go and knock on the door And so many problems that, in life can be solved by simply having that one-on-one conversation. So perhaps the person isn't getting your text messages. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe they've been really busy, and we've all been in situations where you get a text message, you look at it, you mean to respond and you don't. There could be something going on in their personal lives. So I don't really think people should ever shy away from politely knocking on a door and just seeing if somebody is okay. And I think that if you approach communication from that place of concern, not like condescending concern, but just a, hey, neighborly knock on the door, that you can really mitigate a lot of problems right off the bat. I think this is especially true for people who have older tenants, especially senior residents at this time. Coming into the holidays as well is a very isolating time for people. So, knocking on the door, just making sure people are okay, making sure people have what they need, is very important. And then that just lets them know that you're approachable as well, and you're really setting yourself up in that situation for a successful customer relationship.
Definitely. So next question, should landlords be starting social media pages or groups for their buildings?
This is really up to you and what works best for your building. I don't necessarily think that having a social media page for your specific building would be the way to go because of tenant turnover and people moving on. And that's one more thing for you to manage. What I would think works best is an email newsletter. That's actually what I feel somebody with a building having a, Pitt Meadows Court Gazette newsletter would actually be the better alternative to that. Everything on social media, there's a lot of positive there as well, but it is something that you have to manage, and you don't necessarily want to put yourself in a position where now you're responsible for being the administrator of a Facebook page, making sure you're removing tenants who don't live there anymore, that type of thing. I think it would just be something that would be, I don't see any value in that for building managers, but I do see value in having like a community newsletter and that type of thing, or even a little community event. I know we can't have them right now, but one of our large members, Hollyburn, they do a really good job at tenant engagement by having little summer barbecues for their tenants. And they just do hot dogs, the kids come out, and everyone gets a chance to sit around and chit chat and really just enjoy being part of that community.
Fantastic. So I think we're coming to an end to today's webinar. So thank you everyone who attended today. Again, just to remind everyone that today's webinar was sponsored by the I Rent It Right e-learning course, which can be found, information for that can be found on our homepage. And of course we email out about it fairly regularly as well.
And we should mention, Hunter, that course is now complimentary, so you're able to complete it free of charge. It's a fantastic program. Hunter put a lot of work into developing that program to really meet the educational needs of people. So
we communicated with our members and got feedback and developed that. So
that's absolutely true.
But it actually, we laughed, but the truth is that's how we develop our resources, including that course. It was a lot of taking information from a variety of sources to develop a resource that would meet the most number of members and landlords really across the province in general. If you want more information from Kimberly Coates, our Director of Member Engagement, like I said, you can read her article on page 22 of the winter edition of The Key and how to be a brand ambassador. Thank you, and happy holidays.
Thanks very much.